Two young girls set out on their scooters to grab some snacks from the store, but what seemed like an ordinary outing quickly turned into something far darker. As time went on, the case unfolded with twists no one could have imagined, and its conclusion left many stunned. Michaela was born on January 24, 1979, in Oakland, California. She was her parents' first child after years of longing to start a family. Following 5 years of waiting, her parents welcomed 2 more children and eventually settled in the quieter town of Hayward. Life there was calm and family-oriented. Michaela grew up as a joyful, lively child who loved playing with her siblings and spending time with her best friend, Katrina. The girls lived just across the street from one another, which meant they spent much of their time together, playing and visiting each other's homes. On November 19, 1988, 9-year-old Michaela and her best friend Katrina were darting back and forth between their houses, trying on different outfits for an upcoming school performance. The morning was filled with excitement, made even better by the fact that Thanksgiving break had just begun. That same morning, Katrina's father handed her $1.05 to buy some candy. Overjoyed, the two friends hurried to Michaela's house to ask her mother for permission to walk to a nearby store, located less than a mile away. Michaela's mom hesitated at first, uneasy about letting 2 9-year-old girls go on their own since they had never made the trip without an adult before. Though the girls had visited the store many times before, it was always in the company of family or older neighbors. After some back and forth, Michaela's mother reluctantly agreed to let them go, but only under the strict rule that they buy their candy and return home right away. She worried especially about Michaela's safety, as she was their long-awaited first child, a true miracle in her parents' eyes. Still, Michaela's mother reassured herself that nothing could possibly go wrong. The store was only a short ride away, so the girls decided to take their scooters. Michaela ran over to Katrina's house, where they planned to use matching scooters, Katrina's own and one borrowed from her brother. When they arrived at the store, they left the scooters outside and went in to buy their treats. But once they stepped back outside, they became wrapped up in conversation and forgot all about their scooters. They began walking back home, but soon realized they had forgotten their scooters. Turning around, they hurried back to the store, only to discover that Michaela's scooter was missing. Believing someone might have moved it, the girls split up to search around the store from different directions. As Michaela made her way through the parking lot, she spotted her scooter leaning against a car parked just a short distance away. As she approached, Katrina was startled by a piercing scream. Rushing back, she saw a man forcefully grabbing Michaela and shoving her into the car beside the scooter. Within moments, the man jumped into the driver's seat and sped off. Stunned and terrified, Katrina ran back inside the store to alert the cashier, who immediately phoned the police. Officers arrived at the scene within minutes. The store clerk, who knew Michaela's father, also phoned him to explain what had happened. Michaela's father, joined by Katrina's dad, rushed to the store, where investigators were already gathering evidence. He asked his wife to remain at home by the phone in case the police needed to contact her. Detectives were met with obstacles right away. There were no surveillance cameras in the area, and the only eyewitness was Katrina, who was so traumatized she could barely describe what she had seen. Katrina's father was eventually permitted to take her home. The cashier then offered the first potential clue. She recalled seeing a suspicious man lingering outside shortly before the abduction. He had parked his car, stepped out, but never went inside. Instead, he paced along the storefront, peering through the windows as though keeping an eye on the girls. The cashier admitted she had a bad feeling, suspecting he might have been planning to rob her. Based on the cashier's account, the suspect was a white male, roughly 30 years old, with a noticeable mustache. He had driven an old maroon sedan, though the model and license plate couldn't be identified. Using this description, police produced a composite sketch and quickly released it to the media. News of Michaela's abduction spread rapidly, shocking the community and beyond that such a bold kidnapping could take place in a busy area of town. Authorities also circulated the sketch and vehicle description to hundreds of patrol officers across the county. Police began stopping any car that resembled the suspects in the desperate hope of rescuing Michaela alive. At the same time, detectives turned over her scooter to forensic specialists for analysis. They suspected the kidnapper had watched Michaela and Katrina arrive at the store, then intentionally moved one of the scooters near his car to set up the abduction. Investigators believed the kidnapper might have left fingerprints on the scooter, and sure enough, they discovered one that didn't match Michaela, Katrina, or their families. The problem, however, was that the print was only partial, making it nearly impossible to run through databases at the time. With technology still limited, police were forced to depend on direct comparisons with individuals who became suspects. By that same evening, the FBI had stepped in, as child abductions had recently increased not only in Hayward but in surrounding cities as well. Authorities feared Michaela's disappearance might be linked to the others. Yet, even with federal resources, heightened media attention, and a growing sense of urgency, the search produced little progress in finding the missing girl. Michaela's parents were shattered by the ordeal. Her mother, overwhelmed with guilt, blamed herself and remembered a disturbing moment that had taken place just a week before the abduction. One morning, Michaela had woken unusually early, sat at the kitchen table, and said she was writing a poem. This was unusual for her, as she was never an early riser. She explained that a noise in the attic had woken her and inspired her to write about people being kidnapped and hidden away in attics rather than killed. At the time, her mother dismissed it as strange musings for a 9-year-old, but after the abduction, it took on a chilling, almost prophetic meaning. She couldn't shake the thought that Michaela might have unknowingly foreshadowed her own fate. In the 2 days that followed, police mounted an exhaustive search for both the suspect and the missing girl. Despite their relentless efforts, investigators still found themselves with no solid leads on Michaela's whereabouts. Hoping for new insights, they returned to speak with Katrina, thinking that with a little time she might remember more. What they encountered instead was a baffling development. The description Katrina gave of the kidnapper was drastically different from the one provided by the cashier. Katrina recalled the man as being about 20 years old, with long, messy, light-colored hair that reached his shoulders and a face marked by pimples. She remembered his striking blue eyes, sharp and fox-like, which stood out in her memory. She also described the vehicle, a beige, boxy sedan riddled with dents. It soon became clear to police that the cashier had described an entirely different individual. Her account was based on the odd behavior of a man lingering near the store, while Katrina, who had actually witnessed the abduction, gave a completely different description of both the suspect and his car. This posed a major setback. The authorities had already released an inaccurate composite sketch to the media and patrol units, meaning countless people were searching for the wrong man. All of this happened during the crucial first 48 hours, the period when quick action is most likely to bring a child home safely. Acting on Katrina's details, investigators created a new composite sketch and distributed it widely. They also began questioning every man in the area with prior sexual offense convictions. Meanwhile, volunteers joined the effort, canvassing neighborhoods door to door in hopes that someone might recognize the suspect or offer a lead that could move the case forward. Thousands of flyers were printed with Michaela's photo and details of the abduction. Within just a few days, an astonishing 42,000 had been distributed. Soon after, investigators received their first promising lead. 3 hikers reported that while exploring a large national park near the city, they had noticed 2 sets of footprints, one belonging to an adult and the other to a child. Curious, the hikers followed the tracks deeper into the forest, where they eventually discovered a blanket and discarded fast food wrappers. Police took this information seriously, suspecting it could be linked to Michaela and her abductor. FBI profilers also noted that such a location fit the likely behavior of the kidnapper, as they believed he would choose a place far removed from civilization to hide his victim. Because of the park's vast size and its close distance to the city, it seemed to fit perfectly with the FBI's theory. Detectives launched a large-scale search, deploying every resource they had. Ground teams scoured the terrain while helicopters equipped with thermal imaging swept the area from above. Despite the massive effort, nothing was found, no trace of Michaela, nor any evidence of where she might have been taken. Searches later expanded to other parks, mountains, and remote areas, but every lead ended in disappointment. Meanwhile, the case drew national attention, generating an overwhelming flood of tips. In just the first month, investigators received nearly 4,000 reports to sift through. Trying to follow up on each one quickly became an enormous challenge. Michaela's disappearance was soon on everyone's mind, not only in Hayward, but also across San Francisco and nearby cities. Even prominent public figures stepped forward, urging citizens to share any information that might help the investigation. A large reward of $70,000 was announced, and Michaela's photo was soon printed on millions of milk cartons across the state. Despite the overwhelming community support and the sheer number of tips, detectives made little headway. By late December, 6 weeks after the abduction, the police admitted that their only progress was in having chased down thousands of leads. From that point on, the case stalled. For months, tips continued pouring in, and investigators pursued each one as best they could. Michaela's mother even carried out her own inquiries, researching similar cases and trying to piece together who might have taken her daughter. The family and authorities clung to the hope that Michaela was still alive and being held somewhere. Then, in 1991, detectives began focusing on a 43-year-old man named Timothy Binder, and the deeper they looked into his past, the more disturbing it appeared. Binder had already drawn attention before Michaela's disappearance because of his unsettling behavior. He had been sending money, gifts, and letters to numerous young girls. Some of these letters included Bible verses with phrases such as, "I have chosen you," and "be with me." Alarmed parents reported this to the police, which eventually led to Binder being questioned. He defended himself by claiming he only wanted to befriend the girls, believing they were lonely. But investigators uncovered a disturbing past. In 1985, he was dismissed from his job at Child Protective Services in Colorado after it was discovered that he had been gathering personal details about young girls. Later, he continued sending them money, gifts, and letters. When authorities searched his van, they found a collection of children's photographs along with Bible verses taped across the interior. Binder also had a previous arrest for attempting to lure 2 young girls into his van, though no charges were ever filed. His behavior grew stranger still. He was known to spend long periods visiting the graves of young girls at local cemeteries. But things took a far darker turn. Just 6 months before Michaela vanished, a 7-year-old girl named Amber went missing nearby. Soon after Amber's disappearance, Binder contacted her mother, offering his help and visiting her home frequently. He even sent a letter to the police predicting that the next child to go missing would be 9 years old. Months later, Michaela, who was 9, was abducted. Following her disappearance, Binder repeatedly phoned Michaela's mother, visited her house, and insisted on assisting with the search. But the disturbing pattern didn't stop there. In early December 1988, Binder mailed a Christmas card to an FBI profiler he had previously spoken with. The card showed an illustration of a girl holding up 4 fingers. Soon after, a 4-year-old girl went missing in the same town. Though these details were highly suspicious, they remained circumstantial. Still, detectives secured a warrant to search Binder's home, where he lived with his wife. The search, however, turned up nothing that directly connected him to any of the abductions. When the press reported on Binder's strange behavior, public suspicion quickly grew, with many convinced he was a serial killer. He and his family faced harassment and even attacks, prompting him to sue city officials for spreading false information, a case he eventually won. Detectives kept him under investigation for several months, but in the end, they found no solid evidence linking him to the crimes. Some investigators began to believe Binder wasn't actually a danger to children, and that his odd behavior might not have been connected to the abductions at all. As a result, police shifted their attention to other possible suspects. A significant lead didn't surface again until December 1992, 4 years after Michaela's disappearance. That's when an Indiana inmate serving time for robbery contacted authorities, claiming he knew who had abducted Michaela. The inmate alleged that he had even helped bury her body in the same park where evidence had once been found. At first, detectives dismissed his claims, but after he wrote a letter to a major San Francisco newspaper, the story went public. Facing sharp criticism, police eventually agreed to hear him out. The inmate not only promised to show them where Michaela was buried, but also to lead them straight to her killer. He was transported to California and joined police in a search effort. He claimed Michaela's body was buried in a gladiolus field, so officers concentrated their resources there. After 8 hours of digging, the inmate abruptly confessed that he had fabricated the entire story. He said his intention had been to give Michaela's family a sense of closure and help them move on. Both Michaela's relatives and investigators were outraged by the false claim. As punishment, the inmate received an additional 6.5 years on his sentence, nearly doubling his time in prison, and was also ordered in August 2000 to pay Michaela's family $6,000 in compensation. Around this time, a new suspect came into focus. Police arrested a man named Curtis Anderson, who was already under suspicion for the murder of a 7-year-old girl in Fargo the year before. He admitted to the Fargo murder and was sentenced to prison, but detectives suspected he might be linked to other similar crimes. For years, no solid evidence supported this theory, until Curtis, gravely ill, reached out to the FBI. Wanting to unburden himself before his death, he confessed to killing 13 additional girls and women, including 7-year-old Amber, who had gone missing just 6 months before Michaela. Curtis shared details specific enough to make investigators take his claims seriously. Still, the absence of physical evidence and the inability to recover the victims' bodies made it nearly impossible to prove. Regarding Michaela's disappearance, he denied any involvement, even though his car closely matched Katrina's description. FBI agents intended to keep questioning him, but Curtis died in 2012 before they could gather more information. Not long after, another possible suspect emerged. An inmate came forward, telling police that his associate, Loren Herzog, strongly resembled the composite sketch of Michaela's suspected abductor. Detectives took notice, as Loren and his partner had already been convicted of multiple murders they carried out together. Authorities believed the pair might have been responsible for as many as 19 killings, though only some could be proven. Just a month before the inmate's tip, Loren had taken his own life while in prison. Despite this, investigators pursued the lead. Photographs of Loren from his younger years did bear a striking similarity to the sketch, but that alone wasn't enough. To dig deeper, police excavated a well where Loren and his partner had previously disposed of their victims' remains. Inside, they uncovered thousands of bone fragments, which were carefully analyzed by forensic specialists. After thorough testing, experts confirmed the recovered bones came from 5 different girls, but none matched Michaela's DNA. Even after searching additional wells, investigators found no evidence tying Loren to her disappearance. Then, in 2018, the case took a new turn. A man named David Mitchell was charged with the 1986 murders of 2 women near Michaela's hometown. The breakthrough came through modern DNA technology. Biological material once found beneath the victim's fingernails couldn't be analyzed at the time, but advancements allowed investigators to link it directly to David. He was already serving time for the 1989 murder of his 39-year-old girlfriend. Detectives soon began looking into whether he might also be connected to Michaela's case, and they uncovered some compelling links. Investigators learned that David had been in the area at the time of Michaela's abduction. He also closely matched Katrina's description and drove a car similar to the one she remembered. Since David's fingerprints were already in police records, experts re-examined the partial print lifted from Michaela's scooter. With the help of modern technology, they made a breakthrough. The fingerprint was an exact match to David's. By 2020, as hopes of Michaela still being alive had all but faded, David was formally charged with her murder. He denied any involvement, and the case proceeded to trial in early 2023. During the preliminary hearings, the judge determined that there was enough evidence to move forward. David's attorney attempted to undermine the fingerprint evidence, arguing that its presence on the scooter didn't conclusively tie him to the murder. But given the circumstances, the claim appeared weak. After all, it was clear the kidnapper had deliberately placed the scooter beside his car to lure Michaela close enough to grab her. The defense also tried to dispute the murder charges by pointing out that Michaela's body had never been found, arguing there was no proof of her death. But in modern law, this claim carried little weight, as many convictions have been secured in cases where the victim's body was never recovered. The evidence against David was strong, and his long record of violent crimes only reinforced the case. At 16, he had broken into a home and assaulted a woman at knife point. He served just a year in prison before being released, only to attempt another assault on a different woman shortly afterward. That crime earned him another 2-year sentence. In May 1988, 7 months before Michaela vanished, David was released again, but soon arrested for robbing a store. He was sentenced to a year, yet freed just 1 month before Michaela's abduction. When news finally broke of his arrest decades later, Michaela's father traveled from another state to attend the press conference announcing that his daughter's kidnapper had been caught. Tragically, Michaela's mother, who had spent decades holding on to hope that her daughter was still alive, was unable to attend the announcement as she was battling cancer. Shortly after the arrest, she passed away, expressing gratitude that investigators had uncovered the truth before her final days. Police vowed to continue searching for Michaela's remains, and even offered a $10,000 reward for any information that could lead to their discovery. David Mitchell's upcoming trial will cover 3 cases. Michaela's, along with the 2 murders linked to him through DNA found beneath the victim's nails. At first, prosecutors planned to seek the death penalty. However, after a change in district attorney, the new leadership decided not to pursue it. If David is convicted of all 3 murders, he will face several decades in prison rather than a true life sentence. This decision enraged the victims' families and stirred widespread media attention, leaving David's attorney as the only one who publicly supported the change. That said, David is already 62, making it highly unlikely he'll survive long enough to complete even the reduced sentence. What stands out most is how the correctional system repeatedly released him early, despite his record of violent crimes. Had he not been freed just a month before Michaela's abduction, her murder might never have happened, and she could still be alive today.